Okay, good.
Come on, guys. 7:50. I moved heaven and hell to be here on time, so let's go.
Okay, got it. Let's go. All right. So,
Okay, let's start the recording of the debate.
all right, guys, we have Jim debating Bobert, aka Summer, and they'll be debating on the topic: the problem of evil defeats the Christian God. Just Jim affirms the proposition, while Bobert denies it. So, Jim, since you're the affirmative, you get 7 minutes on the clock on the timer, and we'll set the timer whenever you say your first word.
Great, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be considering the proposition: the problem of evil defeats the Christian God. Now, I'm taking the affirmative, as was mentioned. So let me explain what we mean by this and what the problem of evil is, right? Both in its logical and evidential form. And these both are going to constitute both rebutting defeaters and undercutting defeaters for the belief in the Christian God. So first, a quick word on terms. When discussing with my opponent here, she has defined good as that which reflects the nature, will, and character of God. Life-giving, just, loving, ordered towards flourishing. Whereby evil, in contrast, is not a created substance, but a privation, a distortion, a corruption of what ought be. Now, I'm willing to grant these definitions for the sake of the debate because they actually sharpen the problem. If God's very nature is life-giving and ordered towards flourishing, then the staggering quantity of distortion, privation, and annihilation of flourishing in our world sits uneasily, indeed implausibly, alongside that definition. Now, what do I mean when I say that the problem of evil, quote unquote, defeats the Christian God? Well, in epistemology, a rebutting defeater is evidence that directly contradicts a belief, giving us reasons to think that it is false. An undercutting defeater doesn't prove the belief is false, but it undermines the rational support we had for it. And the problem of evil works in both ways. It not only presents evil in the world as a positive evidence against the existence of an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good God, but it also shows that the usual reasons for belief are undercut once we see the depth and character of suffering. Now, when looking at the family of the problem of evils, we have two varieties. First, the logical problem, presented by J.L. Mackie, and it's framing the tension between the four claims that the Christian holds, right? That God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, and that evil exists. Now, if God is all-powerful, he can prevent evil. If he's all-knowing, he knows how to do so. And if he's all-good, he wants to. However, we see evil, right? Understood here as a vast privation of flourishing. We see it everywhere. Even Plantinga's free will defense is often said to have answered this charge, but even if free will accounts for some moral evils, it cannot account for all natural evils, like earthquakes, pediatric cancers, billions of years of animal predation. And even with moral evils, we know that freedom does not logically require wrongdoing, right? God is free, and yet he's impeccable. Christians believe that heaven will contain freedom without evil. So this logical tension remains sharp. Now, the second one is the evidential problem. Here we could look at William Rowe's classic example of a fawn burned alive in a forest, dying slowly and alone. We see no greater good served here, no lesson learned, no free will preserved. This is what philosophers call gratuitous evil and has no apparent utility. And the evidential problem argues that our world contains not just isolated incidents, but entire landscapes of such seemingly pointless suffering. Paul Draper even said that the overall distribution of pain and pleasure in sentient life is far more likely on the hypothesis of indifference than on theism. So in Bayesian terms, the data fits naturalism far better than the Christian God hypothesis. So where does that leave us? With powerful defeaters. The logical problem provides a rebutting defeater, a direct challenge to the coherence of affirming God's maximal attributes alongside evil, and the evidential problem provides an undercutting defeater. It weakens whatever positive reasons one might claim for theism, because the sheer scale and nature of suffering are deeply surprising on Christian theism, but not at all on naturalism. Now, my opponent might appeal to some theodicies like free will defense or the greater good defense, and we could analyze these, but we're going to see that neither of these defense help with these problems, right? They make so the burden here of proof to make the proposition false that my interlocutor must do more than show that evil is logically compatible with God. They must demonstrate that the sheer scale, distribution, and apparent pointless character of the world's evils are to be expected on a hypothesis of the Christian God. They must show why an all good, all powerful, all knowing, life-giving being would allow vast privations of flourishing, millions of years of suffering, horrors that shatter agency and meaning. Without such a demonstration, the problem of evil stands as a powerful defeater for the Christian God. So, in conclusion, redefining evil as privation doesn't really soften the problem, it sharpens it. If evil is absence, then God's failure to supply what is absent becomes even harder to explain. If God is life-giving, then the obliteration of life looks like a direct counter-evidence. If God's nature is love, then the loveless distribution of suffering is profoundly out of step with that nature. On any fair accounting, the problem of evil is not merely a puzzle for the Christian God, it is definitely a defeater.
Okay, so that concludes your time, Jim?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, all right, thank you. So that will conclude Jim's opener. Time for Summer's opener. And we'll set the time whenever you say your first word.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, judges, hello, debater. Today we're asked to consider whether the existence of evil defeats the Christian God. But before we rush to judgment, we must ask, what is evil and what kind of God are we talking about? Because if we misunderstand either, we risk building an argument on sand. Let's begin with clarity. In Christian theology, good is not whatever feels pleasant or convenient. Good is that which reflects the nature, will, and character of God. It is life-giving, just, loving, and ordered toward flourishing. Scripture says, no one is good except God alone, Mark 10:18. Goodness is not arbitrary, it's objective, grounded in the unchanging nature of God. And evil is not a created substance, it's a privation, a corruption, or absence of good. Augustine described it as the shadow cast when goodness is rejected. Just as darkness is the absence of light, evil is what happens when good is distorted, withheld, or turned away from. This framing matters because if evil is not a created thing, then its existence does not logically contradict the existence of a good creator. Now let's talk about the nature of that creator. What does it mean that God is holy? When Christians say God is holy, we don't just mean he's morally pure. Holiness means set apart, utterly unique, morally perfect, and ontologically distinct from creation. Isaiah 6:3 says, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. Holiness is not just an attribute, it's the essence of God's being. It means he is not like us. He's not bound by time, weakness, or corruption. Holiness includes justice, mercy, wrath, patience, and love, all in perfect harmony. A holy God does not ignore evil. He names it, judges it, and ultimately redeems it. But he does so on his terms, not ours. Philosophically, the Christian God is understood as a maximally great being possessing omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence. But let's cash that out. Omniscience. God knows all things, past, present, future, and all possibilities. He sees every consequence of every choice. Omnipotence. God can do all things that are logically possible and consistent with his nature. His power includes restraint, not just force. Omnibenevolence. God is perfectly good, not just in sentiment, but in action. He wills what is best, even when it costs him everything. This is not a God who micromanages or manipulates. This is a God who creates, sustains, and redeems. The logical argument says, if God is all-powerful, all-good, and all-knowing, then evil should not exist. Therefore, God cannot exist. But this argument assumes that God cannot have morally sufficient reasons for allowing evil. That assumption is not only unproven, it's philosophically weak. Christian theology offers a coherent response. God created beings with free will. That freedom includes the possibility of choosing evil. Without freedom, love is coerced, growth is impossible, and morality is meaningless. Alvin Plantinga's free will defense demonstrates that the existence of evil is not logically incompatible with a good and omnipotent God. In fact, the Christian God allows evil because he values love, growth, and redemption. So the logical problem evil fails, not because evil isn't real, but because its existence doesn't contradict the nature of the Christian God. Now, the evidential argument says, look at the suffering in the world. It's too much. Surely a good God wouldn't allow this. This is a more emotionally charged argument. It appeals not to logic, but to probability and moral intuition. But it still rests on a limited human perspective. Let's be honest. Suffering is real. It's painful. It's often unjust. But Christianity doesn't ignore suffering. It centers on it. The cross is the ultimate response to evil. God enters into human pain, bears it, and transforms it. Jesus doesn't avoid suffering. He redeems it. And suffering, while painful, can produce perseverance, character, and hope. Romans 5 says it plainly. The soul-making theodicy reminds us that hardship can refine us, deepen compassion, and draw us closer to God. Moreover, the evidential argument assumes that we, as finite beings, can grasp the full moral calculus of an infinite God. That's a bold assumption. Skeptical theism reminds us that our limited vantage point may not allow us to see the greater goods that suffering can produce. Scripture is not naive about evil. It names it, wrestles with it, and ultimately defeats it. In Genesis 3, evil enters through human choice, not divine creation. In Romans 1, humanity exchanged the truth of God for a lie. In John 3:19, people love darkness rather than the light. In Luke 15, the prodigal son experiences privation but is restored. And in the cross, God enters into human pain, bears it, and transforms it. Real-world examples echo this truth. Corrie ten Boom forgave her captors and preached hope after the Holocaust. Johnny Erickson Tada turned paralysis into ministry. And in our own stories, through the chaos that we face, we're able to choose love, and it grounds us. That's redemption, the goodness shining through the privation. If evil is real, then good must be real. And if good is real, then we need a source for it. That source is the Christian God. Without him, evil becomes just a label, subjective, shifting, meaningless. But with him, evil is named, confronted, and ultimately defeated. The Christian God is not defeated by evil. He is defined by how he responds to it. He creates good, he permits freedom, he engages suffering, he redeems what is broken, and he resurrects what was lost. Evil is real, but it's not the final word. The resurrection proves that. So no, the problem of evil does not defeat the Christian God. It reveals the depth of his love, the cost of freedom, and the power of redemption. Thank you.
Okay, and that'll conclude your time. All right, we're on to the cross-examinations. You get 5 minutes. There'll be 3 rounds of this, and Jim will start your timer whenever you say your first word.
Great. So I think my interlocutor kind of addressed a lot of the points that I presented in my argument in terms of presenting this free will theodicy, in terms of what Plantinga talks about, which is insufficient. And for those who are a little bit confused, I'm presenting both arguments as both rebutting defeater as well as an undercutting defeater. So for this round, let's begin with the internal coherence of the Christian God. If God is maximally good, powerful, and knowing, and if good means, according to my interlocutor, right, according to you, Summer, a life-giving order towards flourishing, then the sheer presence of evil demands an explanation. So I guess my first question to you is, if God is omnipotent and omniscient, is there ever a situation in which he cannot supply the good that is absent, if we're understanding evil to be this privation?
Summer?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah. If God is omnipotent, as you clarified what omnipotent is, and omniscient, is there ever a situation in which he cannot supply the good that is absent, right? Because here you're saying that evil is just the absence of good. right? So is there a situation where he cannot supply that good?
Where he cannot? I mean, if it violates like his nature or like logic, I think that would be obviously a thing that would be keeping
Yeah,
him
but I
from doing
mean,
it.
it's stipulated that if his nature is that which is, all loving and just and, he's life-giving, right? Um, this wouldn't in no way contradict his nature, right? It doesn't seem as if though there are situations in which he couldn't supply that, right?
You're cutting out a little bit.
Oh my gosh. I
Um,
said there doesn't seem to be, unless you could.
I don't know how a finite. I don't think that like a finite human can judge the moral calculus of an infinite being like that.
So are you kind of invoking some skeptical theism here in terms of the fact that he
Yeah,
doesn't stop it is kind of indicative that we just don't know why he allows it?
yeah. Like humans' moral intuitions are limited by like time, culture, and scope.
Okay. Well, look, we're going to put a pin on that because we could address it in the next round of questions. I kind of want to focus on this logical tension, but it doesn't seem as if, though, you have an answer in terms of when he cannot supply this. It's just a matter of like he could supply it. The reason he doesn't, we just don't know, right? But it doesn't seem that because God is omniscient and omnipotent, it doesn't seem as if, though, there is any situation where he can't supply it. Here's my next question. If God's very nature is life-giving, and it's ordered towards flourishing, the way that you kind of describe it, how do you reconcile the reality of evils that kind of obliterate flourishing altogether, right? Like we could look at examples of like an infant dying before they can even develop any kind of moral character as an example, right? This would be something that kind of obliterates flourishing altogether. How do you reconcile God's very nature with this type of evil existing? All right. Mhm.
Evil proves that there's no. Uh, if evil's real and not just a feeling, then we are invoking a moral standard, and that standard must be transcendent. Otherwise, evil is just a label for things we don't like.
Yeah, I don't know that that really gave kind of any cohesive response to it. Look, I mean, look, these questions highlight the very.
I mean, unless you're asking like,
Uh-huh. Look,
like, are you just asking like if God knew evil would happen, then why did He create?
yeah, look, I have 13 seconds, so I'll just end it with this, right? The questions that I'm trying to gear in this kind of section, right, is to highlight that the very definition of God's goodness and power seems to have tension with the world that we observe, right? Because if the Christian God is truly life-giving and he's ordered towards flourishing, there shouldn't be this type of gratuitous destruction that we see in terms of life, right? And it doesn't seem like you were able to kind of give good responses other than, invoke some skeptical theism.
Time. Okay, Summer, it's your cross. We'll start the time whenever you say the first word.
Okay, I'm going to continue on your kind of train of questioning. I think that like what it boils down to, that what you're asking, it has to do with like, because you say gratuitous, are you talking about like quantity or the type of evil?
Yeah, we're talking about the type of evil that don't seem to have any type of utility in terms of why they exist, right? I think this was highlighted when I mentioned, a fawn that is burned alive in the forest, right? Nobody witnesses this fawn dying, right? It dies a very slow, gruesome death, right? It doesn't seem that that type of evil has any kind of a greater good or soul building or anything of that nature.
Okay, so like I think that the way that I would like, since he's all powerful, I guess that's kind of like what you're implying is that like he should have enough power to do all of this fixing in the present moment.
Well, when we're looking at gratuitous evil under the evidential argument, right, the evidential problem of evil, what we're trying to do is we're trying to give some type of inductive argument, right, where it seems less probable, right? When we look at both hypotheses, we look at the hypothesis that, God exists and God.
Okay, so is it possible, Jim? Is it possible suffering has meaning beyond what we immediately perceive?
In what way?
Like meaning be like you're saying that there is no reason, but there are things that occur where you might not know like why it happened, but later a greater lesson came out of it, right? Like there was a bigger
lesson for
story
who?
behind it or something like that.
Yeah, the example that we saw of the fawn dying slowly in the forest, like forest fire, nobody witnessed it. Nobody
I don't
saw
think that that's relevant. I think it has to do with more so the possibility, right? So
Well, what possibility
it's
though?
possible
What is greater
that any
good?
suffering has meaning beyond what we as individuals perceive.
Yeah, in what way though? If there is
Sorry, I
no
didn't hear you.
perception, yeah, in what way? If there's no perception of the evil that's happening, how does it serve as a greater good for humans?
So like if you're not there but someone else is there to perceive the suffering and it changes their life,
It's stipulated that nobody's
it's
there.
possible that suffering had meaning beyond what you could perceive.
It's stipulated in the hypothetical.
No, I'm saying so
that
like
nobody's there to see it, right? Look, if we look at like cases of the billions of years of animal predation prior to humans existing, nobody was there to witness that. Nobody
I
was
don't
there.
think that has to do with what I'm talking about.
That's exactly the point that you're asking.
Yeah. So I'm talking about no. So I'm saying in the instance where you do like perceive some type of suffering and you can't find meaning in it, is it possible that there is meaning beyond what you perceive?
Well, I mean, like, if you want to give that hypothetical, that doesn't really address the hypothetical of what gratuitous evils are, because we're looking at gratuitous evils, right? We're looking at gratuities that don't seem to have a utility. And the classic example that Roe gives is something like that, right? Something that's not perceived, something that's not looked at. When we're looking, when we understand that these evils exist, something like predation, like billions of years of predation, those evils seem unnecessary, right? They seem to give no greater good. Now, if you're saying that there is a greater good, right, then it seems as if though there's a tension between an all-good God, right, an all-powerful God who could have achieved that greater good without predation, right, without that unnecessary evil. Now, are you saying that the evil that seems gratuitous to us is somehow necessary for God's goals?
So I think that you're using a different definition of evil when you say gratuitous evil, right?
Yeah, look, under the notion of privation, right, which isn't just an absence of good here, right?
Do you think?
Uh-huh. I think there's a little bit of a lag.
Do you think that a finite human mind can judge the moral calculus of an infinite being?
Well, in this case, we're not really judging moral calculus. We're just looking about the world and making an inductive argument under the thesis that God exists or under the thesis that naturalism is true. And if God exists holding these properties, then the gratuitous evils that we see don't seem to be compatible or probabilistic under that notion.
Time. Okay. 5 minutes for Jim.
Yeah.
Start the time whenever he says his first word.
Okay, so in this round, let's kind of like piggyback on that, right? The gratuitous evils and this kind of evidential burden that we have, right? It's not just that evil exists, right? It's that much of it appears utterly pointless, right? It doesn't have a greater good or a necessity. And that's the heart of what gratuitous evils is if it's not clear, right? So, question for you. Can you name some type of greater good that logically requires the slow death of a child from cancer? some kind of good that could not have been achieved by any other means, that's outside of the scope of an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God?
I don't think I understand your question in the context of the Christian
Sure.
God I've explained,
Let me-
right?
So if God is all good, the way that you explained it, and you explained that good just means, right, that God is life-giving, he's just, he's loving, that he is ordered towards flourishing. If we understand that this is what good means, right, the question is there some kind of greater good, something that reflects God's nature, that logically requires that the slow death of a child from cancer, right? Because it seems that if God is goodness in this way, right, and he has these powers, he could achieve these things without the necessary slow death of a child from cancer. But you're saying that no, these things that seem gratuitous, they just only seem that way, but they're necessary. So my question to you is, well, what kind of greater good logically requires that type of, suffering or evil?
Yeah, so I don't think I would I think Christianity reframes your claim. I think that in your claim there's kind of an assumption going on that power means control, that goodness means comfort, and that evil is unnecessary. Um,
No, I mean, like,
in the Christian reframing, evil is not necessary for God, but it
yeah.
may be for us.
Well, I'm operating under the kind
Like
of
God doesn't need evil. It's not God is not dependent on it.
Well, I know that God doesn't depend it, but the fact that we see this type of evil in the world, particularly gratuitous evil, is indicative that there's some tension, or at least some. It's less probable that this God that has both these omnipowers and he's good in the way that you describe good, would exist, right? It doesn't seem as if though presented with things like the slow death of a child from cancer, or earthquakes happening where millions of people die, right? It doesn't seem like you are able to name some greater good that is logically required, or entails this, right? Here, look, let me give you another question, right?
Yeah,
Because it
so like I gave some real world examples of people that that did suffer like that.
Yeah, so it seems as if though you're saying, look, when we look about the world and we see infants dying, children getting SA trafficked, all these evils in the world. Well, God is just hopeless, right? Like God cannot do anything. Like the greater goal that God
no, I
has.
told you about those real people that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me just.
I did tell you about like real life people. How much of a lag is there?
Probably like 3 seconds or something.
So the Holocaust survivor, she got arrested for like hiding Jews, and she suffered like unimaginable evil under her captors. But her testimony of like forgiveness and faith became like a beacon of hope for people who were going through struggles.
So the question is,
I have more examples.
Do you think that God God could not have presented himself or given this person some type of evidence such that they had that faith in God without having her suffer through the Holocaust?
Right. I was saying earlier that like evil's not like a tool in his toolbox, but he permits evil. And this all aligns with his nature. And it's not because he's powerless, but because he's wise and just and relational.
Yeah, then I don't.
So us going through these things are for soul building.
That's fine. Let me just finish with this closing remark. Right? If evil is supposed to be permitted only for some higher purpose like this, then gratuitous evils like this evil that doesn't seem to have any kind of apparent utility, it strikes directly at the implausibility of the claim. Right? The evidence weight falls heavily against this notion of an all-loving God. If God can't achieve his means without this type of like suffering happening in the world.
Okay.
And with
Yeah,
it, we will move on to the next
Yeah.
cross-examination section. So, Bobert, you're going to get 5 minutes.
Yep. I put it. So we'll start your time whenever you say the first word.
okay. So, like to assume that he would like eliminate evil on like on how the time or way that we like think that he should, I don't think that quite tracks. God's goodness doesn't have to be immediate comfort. The way he's described in the Bible shows that he's more into long-term redemption. God's power is exercised in harmony with his wisdom and love. He permits evil temporarily to preserve freedom, enable growth, and fulfill a redemptive arc. The cross is proof. God doesn't eliminate evil by force. He defeats it through sacrifice. Also, the quantity does not equal contradiction. With this evidential problem of evil, you're relying on emotional weight, not logical inconsistency. Christianity doesn't ignore suffering, it centers on it. Jesus enters into human pain, bears it, and transforms it. Romans 5 says suffering produces perseverance, character, and hope. That's not defeat, that's redemption. I know that you kind of implied like about the necessity, and the thing I have to say about that is first, freedom requires the possibility of evil. A world without the potential for wrongdoing would be a world without genuine freedom, love, or moral responsibility. God's omnipotence includes the power to create beings capable of choosing, and that includes the risk of choosing wrongly. Evil is not necessary for God's existence, but it is a possible consequence of creating beings with moral agency. Soul making requires exposure to suffering. Again, Romans 5 tells us that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character hope. God's power is not shown in eliminating all pain instantly, but in transforming it into redemption. Think of Joseph in Genesis. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Evil became the stage for restoration. And Christianity offers a narrative arc: creation, fall, redemption, and glory. Evil is not the beginning or the end, it's the rupture in the middle. God's power is revealed not in preventing the fall, but in redeeming it through the cross and resurrection. The necessity of evil is not metaphysical, it's narrative. It's the space where grace enters. Lastly, omnipotence does not mean arbitrary control. His restraint is not weakness, it's wisdom. So not necessary for God, but it's permitted for us, which reveals the depth of his love, the cost of freedom, and the power of redemption. I want to ask you, Jim, how could moral growth or love exist without the possibility of evil?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, do you think that in order for an agent to be moral, evil needs to be present?
I'm sorry, I asked a question. Are you asking me a question?
Okay, I'm sorry. That was a rhetorical question. So if the question you're positing is something to the effect of, look, evil is necessary in order for us to have morality, then I would just look at God, right? If that's the case, and God does have moral standards, right, by which he gives us, or Christians, moral law, does God need to go through evil? Well, obviously not, right? There's no evil in the presence of God. There's no privation. And so evil is not necessarily intrinsic to having morality. When we look at people who go to heaven, there's no evil in heaven, yet I wouldn't think that you would posit that, angels are immoral beings, right? They have morality. So no, I don't think that evil is necessary for morality to exist. God could have created a world in which we understood morality the way that the Bible says that it's written in our hearts.
No, I think I asked how moral growth or love can exist without evil.
Yeah, absolutely. The Bible says it, right? God imprinted morality in our hearts. He could have given us some intuition.
No, I said how.
I'm giving you the how. I'm giving you the how. God could have imprinted or created us in such a way that we have intuitions of what morality is, right? Such that we don't have to look at evil and understand and recognize what's good and bad. That's the how.
Okay, so you think it's reasonable? Yeah, based on like the Christian God and how he's depicted, you think it's reasonable to expect a world with no evil?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're committed to God having the omni properties, right? He's all loving. So he would want to have a world without evil. He doesn't have a desire for evil. He's all knowing. He knows how to prevent it, and he's all powerful. He could do it. It's within his reach. So
That
yeah, I would
time.
expect.
It's time. Yeah, Jim, you could start your cross whenever we say first word.
All right, perfect. So like, look, let's just examine these like theodicies, right? This free will and this greater good theodicies, right? Do they really actually succeed in giving explanations, or do they just collapse, right? Because I think they do, especially if Summer is giving some type of skeptical theism response to this, right? So, a question for you, Summer: if every evil is said to serve some greater good, doesn't this just then collapse the definition of good into whatever God wills, right? It just makes the concept of goodness meaningless.
Um, like I said before, that assumes God's goodness means immediate comfort rather than long-term redemption. In Christian theology, God's power is exercised in harmony with his wisdom and love. He permits evil temporarily to preserve freedom and enable growth and fulfill a redemptive arc. The cross is proof God doesn't eliminate evil by force, he defeats it through sacrifice.
I get that. But like what you're saying is that like, look, we understand that God's love or his goodness isn't immediate, right? So that just leaves room so that when you do see suffering, right, that's still good, right? When you see a child dying from cancer, when you see these hurricanes that kill millions of people, or earthquakes, right, like millions of people, when you see all that, you don't have a leg to stand on to look about the world and say, this is evil, this is bad, because according to you, it's all part of God's goodness, right? All this is part of his redemptive goal, right? So when you look about the world, how is it that you even could make a distinction?
Because we defined evil as a privation of that goodness, right?
That is a privation. Do you think that if you understand goodness to be God's nature and will, and when we look about the world and we see evil, there is this absence of it? You don't think that, you're saying that, well, that absence, that long suffering is still part of God's plan. So how do you reconcile that?
So nowhere in the Bible does it say that suffering would never happen, right? So the Bible never hides from the pain and suffering. Scripture shows God's justice, mercy, and long suffering in Job's story, in the lament of the Psalms, in the agony of Christ. These all reveal a God who engages suffering. He's not avoiding it.
All you're saying, though, when you look at those sufferings, all those things are part of God's goodness. They're not a privation. They're still part of God's will. And so you can't look at those things.
No, it's obviously not, or he wouldn't have to redeem it.
Well, that seems as if, though, that's the inconsistency, right? Look, let's move on to the next question because time is limited.
No, because the Bible doesn't sanitize evil.
Yeah, that's a problem that you have to reconcile, right? Not me. Like, look, you're invoking this notion of skeptical theism.
No, this shows...
Look, you're invoking this notion of skeptical theism. Saying, look, it seems as if though God has reason.
Yeah, can you give me an answer to that question then, Jim?
Wait, it's my turn to ask questions, right? I could answer it on your turn. You're kind of giving like the skeptical theist response, right? Saying like, look, it seems that, God has reasons beyond us. We can't understand it, but there is a greater good. But like, don't you think that this skeptical theism undercuts not only the problem of evil, but it's going to undercut any kind of moral or positive claims that you make about God's goodness and love, right? If you're skeptical when you look at something bad in the world, whether it's a good or bad thing, like, how do you even make any kind of moral judgments? How can you even, say that God is good? I think that like this type of response just leads to global skepticism, right? Because now you don't know that when you look at something happening evil in the world, right? There could be a greater good, a reason why God allows that. That's just beyond us, right? So it's a good thing that, like, a child is dying from cancer, on your view.
No, but we already conceded that it's possible suffering has meaning beyond what we immediately perceive. And you can't answer how a finite human mind can judge the moral calculus of an infinite being.
Do you think that if there is meaning beyond what we see, that meaning is a good thing? Look,
potentially, like I said earlier, like what was meant for evil, it gets turned into good, right?
I'll concede my time.
Did you answer the question? I had a phone call. Did you answer the question?
Come on, AR. This is a professional platform for debate.
Sorry. I had a phone call. Okay. Goodness. All right. You get 5 minutes. Go ahead, Summer. Whenever you're ready.
Go ahead, Summer. One person's answering phone calls. The other host is not even here.
I didn't answer. I rejected. All right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Again, evil is not a rival force or a created substance. It's a privation, a corruption of good, rooted in Augustine, affirmed in Scripture, and consistent with classical theism. It's the only definition that makes sense of both moral outrage and divine goodness. Love requires freedom. A world without the possibility of evil would be a world without choice, growth, or genuine relationship. God knew the cost and chose to redeem it. And if we're granting his attributes, then that means that evil's real and not just a feeling. And we're invoking a moral standard. And that standard must be transcendent. Otherwise, evil's just a label for things we don't like. Christianity offers that standard. Good is what reflects God's nature. Evil is distortion. Without that framework, moral outrage collapses into relativism. Like I said, the Bible doesn't sanitize evil, it redeems it. And some scriptures to back this up are Genesis 3, the fall. With Adam and Eve, they don't create evil, they turn away from God's command. Evil enters through a choice to reject good, not through divine authorship. Romans 1, they exchange the truth for a lie. Evil is described as a trade, a loss, a distortion, not a rival creation. John 3:19, people love darkness rather than light. Darkness is not a force, it's the absence of light. Evil is chosen, not imposed. Prodigal son in Luke 15, the son's rebellion is equivalent to privation of relationship, dignity, and purpose. And his father responds with restoration, magnifying God's goodness. Again, if evil is not a created substance, then it can't be used to logically disprove the existence of a good creator. Instead, it points to a deeper theological truth. Evil is parasitic. It depends on the good, it corrupts. And that good, by definition, must come from somewhere. Another example that you were asking for of like a greater good is Johnny Erickson Tada. It's a quadriplegic author and speaker that was in a diving accident and paralyzed, but turned that suffering into ministry and a life that embodies soul making. This shows the perseverance, compassion, and purpose born from pain. Another question I have, Jim, is what would a perfect world look like?
I don't know. I think the notion of perfection is very vague and ambiguous. So you'd have to be a little bit more clear on what you mean on the term.
Yeah, so like you're trying to disprove the Christian God, and I'm trying to get to like without the Christian God's perspective and why he allows for evil, how could moral growth or love exist?
Yeah, I think I answered this in the last round.
You didn't really, though. You just kind of spewed things that you think God could do based on a few things from the Bible.
Yeah, so like if you're asking the how, right? Let's say I don't know the how, right? Let's say I don't know the
Yeah.
exact mechanism with which we would have these things, right? However, I do know of certain commitments that you have, right? The commitments that God does know how. He knows how because he's all knowing. And not only does he know how, but God has the power to do so. Why? Because he's all powerful. So maybe that's a job for God, right? Because God probably knows how to do that insofar as he could do it without instantiating any kind of evil. And why would he not want to instantiate any kind of evil? Because of the commitment that you have that he's all loving, right? And so even if I don't have an answer for that,
Yeah, but he does deal with it, right? In the Bible, he defeats it. So I don't understand how this would be a problem for him. It seems like it's our problem that he actually shows grace and takes care of for us.
Sure, but like it's not really a defeater insofar as the child right now who is being raped in an alley, is actually suffering pain as we
Time. Time. Okay. You can start your closer, Jim. Give you 3 minutes.
Great. So, ladies and gentlemen, look, we've seen tonight that the problem of evil is not just a minor puzzle. It's a powerful defeater for the Christian God. And let me tie the threads together for those of you who are just tuning in. We began the discussion with the very definitions that my opponent accepts, that God is said to be maximally powerful, maximally knowing, maximally good, where good here is life-giving, loving, and order towards flourishing. We accepted that evil is the privation, the distortion of what ought be. And now these definitions actually sharpen the problem, because if God's very essence is to supply flourishing, then every absence of flourishing, every privation becomes evidence against his existence. The logical problem presses this tension. If God can prevent privation, knows about them, and wills only life-giving good, why do they exist at all? Free will does not explain natural evils, and even within moral evil, it fails. Because God himself is free, yet he has no evil, and Christians believe heaven will contain freedom without any evil. So this logical coherence of the Christian God remains strained. And the evidential problem cuts even deeper. The world is saturated with what Rowe called gratuitous evils, evils that serve no discernible greater good. Animals burning alive in the forest, a child dying slowly of cancer, billions of years of animal predation, even before humans arrived on Earth. These are just not just lacks, they are seemingly pointless devastations of flourishing. And if the Christian God is life-giving, these are precisely what we would not expect. We examine the theodicies. Free will cannot justify natural evils, nor the sheer scope of moral evils. Greater good defense collapses goodness into whatever God wills, robbing the term of all meaning. And skeptical theism, this appeal to mystery, it undercuts not only the problem of evil, but every positive claim we make about God's goodness and his love. In short, these answers do not resolve the problem. They compound it. So where does that leave us? Well, the problem of evil serves as a rebutting defeater by presenting the existence and distribution of evil as direct evidence against the Christian God. And it serves as an undercutting defeater by stripping away the rational support for belief, showing that the Christian God hypothesis fails to predict the world we see. The burden on my opponent is clear. They must show not merely that evil is logically possible alongside God, but that this specific pattern in sheer scale is what we should not expect under the Christian God, or we should expect rather. In the end, look, privation is not only in the world, it is in defense of this God, and the absence of flourishing all around us, from the natural order to the horrors of human history, stand as testimony against the claim that this all good, all powerful, all knowing Christian God governs reality. And that's why the problem of evil defeats the Christian God. Thanks.
Okay. And now you get 3 minutes. Go ahead, Summer. Start whenever you want.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, judges, fellow thinkers, we've spent this debate wrestling with one of the most profound questions in human history. If evil exists, can the Christian God still be real? And I've argued clearly, consistently, and biblically that the answer is yes. Not because evil is trivial, not because suffering is easy, but because the Christian God is not defeated by evil. He confronts it, absorbs it, and ultimately overcomes it. Let's revisit the foundation. We've agreed that evil is not a substance God created. It's a privation, a corruption or absence of good. Like darkness is the absence of light, evil is what happens when good is distorted or rejected. This matters because if evil is not a rival force, then its existence does not logically contradict the existence of a good creator. Instead, it points to the reality of good and to the source of that good. When I say the Christian God is maximally good, I mean he is holy, just, merciful, and redemptive. He creates good, he permits freedom, he engages suffering, he redeems what is broken, and he resurrects what was lost. The logical problem of evil fails because it assumes that a good God cannot allow evil, but Christianity offers a coherent response. Freedom is necessary for love, growth, and moral responsibility. Evil is permitted, not authored, because God values redemption over control. The evidential problem of evil appeals to emotional weight. It says, look at the suffering, it's too much. But Christianity doesn't ignore suffering, it centers on it. In Genesis 3, evil enters through human choice. Romans 1, humanity exchanges truth for a lie. John 3, people love darkness rather than light. Luke 15, the prodigal son experiences privation but is restored. And in the cross, God enters into human pain, bears it, and transforms it. Jesus doesn't avoid suffering, he redeems it. Real world examples echo this truth. Corrie ten Boom forgave her captors and preached hope after the Holocaust. John Erickson Tada turned paralysis into ministry. And in our own stories, we transform our chaos into fierce love. And that's redemption. That's goodness shining through privation. If evil is real, then good must be real. And if good is real, then we need a source for it. That source is the Christian God. Without him, evil becomes just a label, subjective, shifting, meaningless. But with him, evil is named, confronted, and ultimately defeated. The Christian God is not defeated by evil. He is defined by how he responds to it. Evil is real, but it's not the final word. The resurrection proves that. So no, the problem of evil does not defeat the Christian God. It reveals the depth of his love, the cost of freedom, and the power of redemption. Thank you.
Okay, and that'll conclude the debate. And
Yeah.
judges, do you guys want to give your judgment now, or do you want to wait until like the audience ask questions first? You know?
No, I don't mind. Either one is fine. I'm currently relieving myself, so it's up to you.
Okay. We can do audience comments, questions, critiques, or concerns first, and then we can get to the judges' vote.
Yep. Let's go.
Booyah. So if there's any audience member that wants to come up and say something, feel free to come up.
How long do I have?
You got
You have one question.
How long do I have?
You have one question.
Just have a question.
One question?
Yeah. Shoot, go ahead. Go for it.
Okay, so Jim, so I don't take that evil makes Christianity, or that suffering is indicative of lesser probability of the Christian God existing. And I would actually argue to you, I'm asking you, why, despite the fact that throughout Scripture we see that God, he says, I create the good and the evil, I create the light, separate that from the darkness. I forgot, that Isaiah quote. We see that this is the same God that will literally burn you in hell for all of eternity. This is the same God. So when we look, God has his good side that's really giving, that's forgiving and merciful, but we also has his other side that will burn all of Sodom and Gomorrah and make those people burn alive. So when we look at Abrahamic religions, we see that it acknowledges death and destruction. It says expect death and destruction. Suffering through death and destruction is actually a virtue. It's called long suffering. That you should expect for our... Yeah, this is a question. So I'm basically saying, despite all of this, why do you still say that evil is something that we should not expect on Christianity or Abrahamic faiths in general?
Yeah, do you take the position that God is okay with creating evil?
Yeah, he's absolutely okay with, when I say okay, Am I saying that, oh, he thinks ideally the world should like burn and suffer? No. But at the end of the day, he's the one who brought the curses. He's the one who brought a lot of the bad things that do happen. And that doesn't, in our view, in Abrahamic faiths, despite this, him
So, like,
having
if
sovereignty, he
let me
doesn't
answer your
lose his
question.
loving nature
Let me answer your
despite that.
question. Let me answer
Yeah,
your
go ahead.
question. If you take the position that God is okay with creating evil and is okay with the suffering in the world, then this argument isn't geared towards you, right? This is geared towards the type of Christian that holds the commitments that God has these omnipowers and he's not okay with it. You're just a heretic. That's fine.
All right, thank you, Cypher. We're gonna move on to the next guest.
Damn, that was spicy.
Let's go.
I've cooked Cypher on this so many times.
Damn, he called you a heretic. Like,
All right, Teddy, go ahead. What's your question? Oh, and the polls. Let's get the polls going. Does someone want to do
we
the
gotta
polls?
put the poll.
Wait, the poll isn't up.
Yeah. Someone
gotta
can
put-
do the polls if they want. Go ahead, Teddy. Ask your question.
Okay, my question is, if you could create the perfect heaven,
Wait, to whom? To whom? To both? To one? To the other? Who?
to both,
To both?
if you
Okay.
could create the, if you could create the perfect heaven at the cost of destroying this one, could you do it?
This is not heaven. Wait, sorry, my bad. My bad.
I don't think that has anything to do with anything right now.
I'm saying that this is heaven, where we are right now.
Yeah, I don't think that this this question is. I think it's tangential to the debate topic, so I don't care to answer it.
Okay, thank you, Teddy, for coming up.
Yeah, we can move on to the next guest.
I don't even think Teddy was listening to the debate.
Oh God.
How many guests are we gonna do?
Just a couple more if there's probably like two more probably because we can move on to the judging and then we'll get on.
Hey, Julian.
How's it going?
My sweet lover.
Yeah, I just have a question. Why are you letting this friction guy judge? He can barely speak a sentence coherently. So
Wait,
I think
is this game bar 11? Oh gosh.
no, I'm just questioning. I have a question. Like, who let this friction guy judge? He's incompetent.
No, he's not, Jambar.
Okay, wait. Can you ask him to speak without mumbling? Go ahead.
That's crazy.
Do you have a question for us, Jambar?
I gave you the question, Coco. It's
It's a question for the judges.
This is a good question.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
the question. Look, it's why is a question word, right?
No.
Do we agree with that? So why did you let Detroyer judge?
Is this the same jambar that got destroyed by Cliff in that TikTok?
No, that's a different guy.
All right,
Anyway,
Jambar, thank you for coming up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Goodbye, everybody.
Okay.
thank you for coming out.
Bye, my sweet prince.
Let's try to move this forward. Didn't Tiny want to come up? I guess not.
To be honest, Jambar destroyed Cliff. I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, go ahead.
All right, Brew Facts, what's up, man?
I just want to know why Detroit is not the only one deciding this. What the hell? No.
What? Okay, I took the picture of the poll.
I do have a question for Just Tim. Just Tim, you dismissed the other guy with just saying, well, you're just a heretic. But what does that mean? What does it matter if they're a heretic or not?
Yeah, because the argument is meant to rebut the notions of classical theism, particularly the commitments that a classical theist has, such that they hold to God having these properties, God not wanting evil in the world. But if you take the position that God creates evil and He wants evil in the world, then it's it's not geared towards you.
Well, that would be a Calvinist position. And there were plenty in classical theism that, well, the Calvinist point of view, though Calvin hadn't.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. There's like background noise. Can you what was it?
That's somebody else's.
Yeah. Can everybody mute so I can hear them? Thank you.
Yeah. Classical theism. There are tenets of the Calvinistic idea that God, as a matter of fact, historically, the Jews view God as the one who brought the tempter. And so I don't think it's not just a classical theist. I think it's just a specific kind of classical theism
Well,
that you're
look, I mean,
arguing against.
if the question then is, look, I take God to be the type of God that creates evil, and I take God to be the kind of God that wants evil instantiated in the world, well, then this would undermine what you mean by good, right? What does all good mean in this context? Because then it seems as if though when you look about evil in the world and when you see these things that I was mentioning, like, predation and, child dying from cancer, well, in your view, all that is good, right? Because it's part of God. So it erodes these notions of morality that the Christian has of what good is and what evil is, right? I don't know what leg you stand on to then make moral judgments or have morality in your view.
Well, that's fair. I mean, you just had a debate. I'm not going to sit up here and try to debate you. That's your position. I would just say that wouldn't be my point of view, but that's fair. I was just trying to understand, when you said, well, then you're just a heretic, what that actually meant. But you explained it.
Yeah,
Okay, Brute, thank you for coming up.
Yep. Thank you.
Also to clarify, me and Cypher go way back, so I was just kind of razzing him a bit.
Yeah, what's up, Mob?
Judges ready?
Can I ask
Do
a question?
you have a question, Mob, or are you just here to, for the next debate?
Can
Oh,
I
not
ask
for the next debate. You're not next, right? You're not next, no. You have a question?
Can I ask each debater a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm Sommer. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious what you think is all. Let's say God comes up to you and he says, Sommer, I'm going to create a new universe. It's going to be just like this one. There's going to be humans on it and all that stuff. But in this universe, I'm going to do things a little differently. I'm going to get rid of the child grave. There's going to be no baby torture, none of that stuff. Would you say, oh, that sounds bad, God? Why would you do that? Would you think that?
I would say that, that's probably not God, because the real God already went to the root of the problem to where that is already being removed.
Okay. I'm stipulating it is God, though.
Yeah, well then if you're just making God into he failed the first time around.
Okay. Jim, our question for you is, Matthew Adelstein thinks that, God would make all possible people, okay? And if people are just moral agents or something like that, or moral patients even, animals can count as people. And if origin essentialism is true, then what makes someone people distinct could be based on their origin. So if that's the case, then this could account for a lot of animal suffering, right? Because animals go through different origins, and some of those have suffering in them, and that's what makes them distinct people from other ones, right? So what do you think about that theodicy for animal suffering?
Prima facie, I think that Adelstein's account seems a little bit nonsense, but I'd have to look into more in terms of how he cashes this out in terms of understanding this type of evil for animals. So I wouldn't know, without reading into it.
All right, perfect. I think the judges should give their vote now.
All right, judges, go ahead. Whoever wants to start can give their judgment.
I will start, okay? So, do y'all hear me? Yes, no?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to give my vote
I had questions, but I guess.
Oh my God, it's Matan.
I guess.
Name 5 books.
Hold on, Slurms, please. That's
Okay.
next. We're going to do it after. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So I vote for Jim. I mean, the main reason is because the way that he framed the debate at the beginning. So at the end of his speech, his first speech, he said basically the burden of proof is on his opponent to show that, and I quote, the sheer scale, distribution of pointless evils are expected on the Christian God. And I just don't think anything was done to meet that burden. Bobert engaged with the logical problem of evil. She brought up like soul making and free will, and then she brought up skeptical theism to deal with the evidential problem. But during cross-examination, I don't think she did very well to answer any of the questions that Jim gave. I actually don't think there's a single question. I have it all written down. I don't think there's a single question that Jim gave that she answered that didn't at least have a somewhat convincing reply. So yeah, I think it's a wash. I think Jim won pretty easy.
Okay, we have friction or yeah.
Okay, Friction, you first.
Yeah. So a few things to note. I thought both the openings were decent. There was some decent framing at the beginning by Jim, and he mentioned the two main arguments that he was giving, the logical and evidential problem. I was a little bit unclear about how it was meant to be to present the undercutting defeater, but he sort of got into that a little bit later, but that's fine. And then Summer gave an explanation for why we might expect some evil on the Christian God existing. And also gave some background discussion on the metaethics there. So openings were fine. I think when it came to the crosses, though, I have to judge very firmly in Jim's side for a few reasons. One is, look, you can't be using AI in the midst of a debate to give your responses. I'm sorry. It's just like, it's a no-go. And that definitely was used. I will not be corrected on that. So that, and the responses were often not good. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was. There were some very AI sounding, well, okay, flashcards. If it was flashcards, then it was some weird delays. It sounded very much AI and was oftentimes not connected to the stuff that was being discussed. So it came off as AI.
Brought up,
if it was flashcards. Anyway, regardless. Sorry?
This is fucked up. This character assassination. Come on.
I don't know. It sounded very much like that. If it was something else like flashcards, as she's saying, I don't know. A similar effect anyway. It didn't come off very well. And as far as the content there, I thought someone made some okay points about the logical problem that wasn't really addressed. It wasn't clear to me where the debate stood at the end on that topic, whether the existence of evil logically rules out the existence of the Christian God or God generally. And it looked like Jim was really wanted to focus more on an evidential problem concerning the individual cases or the types and distributions of evils. And that, I think, is where Jim did better, but I wasn't sure about the logical problem. It seemed like it wasn't clear to me that he really pursued it much beyond the opening. So that would be a point for Summer there, I think, on the logical problem. But on the evidential problem, yeah, I think Jim did pretty well, especially when it came to discussing particular cases and pointing out to particular cases where certain evils might be warranted that Summer discussed. It's not clear to me that actually is a response at all. Jim could have been a little bit clearer in addressing that, but
that's compatible with the evidential problem that there are some cases where evils are warranted. Much of a response was given. The discussion of skeptical theism could have been explored a bit more, on both sides, but Jim did bring up a sort of Pandora's box worry, but I wish that would have been developed a little bit further and discussed by Summer. But regardless, so I think both did okay. There's definitely going to been room for improvements on both sides. I will give it to Jim overall, but I could say a lot more, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I think it was clear to everyone in the audience, and just not these two judges, that undisputably it went to Bobert. I'm just kidding. I give the opening to Bobert. I do think that citing scripture when talking about the Christian God is generally going to be more convincing to providing a sort of backing for why it's not something that Christians necessarily need to hold to, that God is the type of thing like the chair destroyer argument, right? The maximal chair destroyer. I don't agree with the verses that she cited necessarily or the theodicies, but at least she kept it within the Christian framework. Jim took a more philosophical approach, which was fine, but that's only going to attack people who are classical theists. You can be a Christian without being a classical theist. You would be called a heretic, I grant that, but that's just an appeal to authority in my opinion. Anyways, obviously every cross-examination goes to Jim. It wasn't close. None of the questions to do with natural evils were even attempted to answer. It just was a constant pivot back to the original claim, which is, well, there could be some greater good. Jim asked for a pointing out of what this greater good could be. That wasn't sufficiently answered. Then there was the soul-making theodicy given in response to some of these skeptical theistic claims, which also doesn't take the wholesale argument into consideration, which is just that there exist these type of evils that are not going to be something that leads to a greater good. That is what gratuitous evil seems to imply. In any case, though, it didn't seem that Bobert met her burden of proof, and when she had the chance to cross-examine Jim, she spent the entire time preaching instead of trying to attack Jim's worldview. She spent the entire time consolidating her worldview, which was actually just a pivot because everything she consolidated was outside of the bounds of which Jim was questioning. So unfortunately, I have to give this to Jim on every cross-examination. Closing, I also give the closing to Jim because, again, the things that he mentioned in the closing weren't discussed throughout the debate, and he mentioned that he would be attacking these sorts of angles in the opening, which should have given Bobert some motivation to address them in the arguments, but they were never addressed. So I'm just going to give the whole thing to Jim with just the openings going to Bobert because she at least had tried to appeal to scripture at the beginning. By judgment, Jim wins.
All right, thank you, judges. Victory goes to Jim. Jim, congrats.
Well, I want to thank Summer. We did go back and forth on this, and I appreciate the debate, and I appreciate the judges' critiques. I will take note of that for the next round, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. GG's, Jim.
W Bobert, W Jim. Holy.
W everybody. Yeah. For sure.